Welcome to TV Anthology Reviews. We're going to start our series on Mystery Science Theater 3000, and we're going to review every single episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000, all 230 of them. 230. And we're going to start with Season 1. Now, as some people might know, the series actually does have a Season 0, the KTMA season, where it was exclusively shown in Minneapolis, Minnesota on KTMA TV. Now, WCW TV. However, these episodes are very, very rough, so I'm going to cover the KTMA series later, since slogging through all 21 episodes of the KTMA public broadcasting season is a bit of a chore. What's surprising about it is actually how much of the KTMA series went along to Season 1. They have kind of the same setup, the Satellite of Love, Joel Hodgson with his two robots. When they have movie sign, they have the door sequence, they have the silhouettes. So it actually is quite similar, what most people would recognize from the series. So it is very impressive for being shown in just Minneapolis on an independent television channel starting in 1988 and ending in 1989. But we're going to start on Season 1. In 1989, it began to run on the Comedy Channel, which would later become known as Comedy Central, where it ran for 7 seasons and then did 3 more seasons on the Sci-Fi Channel, which personally I think those are the best seasons. So, first episode of Season 1 is The Crawling Eye, also known for its alternate title, The Trollenberg Terror, a 1958, black and white, of course, monster movie that premiered on the Comedy Channel on November 25th of 1989. And we're going to check this one out and see how does it compare to the rest. And is it worth watching? Well, of course it is. It's the first episode. So after the classic theme song that we will see reworked over the years, we get the first introduction to the Satellite of Love. We have Joel Hodgson and his 2 robots, and then Dr. Clayton Forrester, played by Trace Boulay, and Dr. Lawrence Earnhardt, played by J. Elvis Weinstein. Now, J. Elvis Weinstein will only be in Season 1, as he makes the mistake that we will see throughout covering the series, where he leaves Mystery Science Theater thinking the grass is greener on the other side. Remember, the grass is not greener on the other side. Do not leave Mystery Science Theater. This is the show you want to stick with. Trey Boulay also voices the robot, Crow T Robot, the gold one with the lacrosse net as hair. J. Elvis Weinstein voices Tom Servo, who will, after this, be voiced by Kevin Murphy. So Mystery Science Theater tends to use its cast in many different ways. They will have some of their writers show up in bit parts, including Mike Nelson. So we get the first invention exchange right off the bat. And the setup is similar to what we're going to see throughout the series. There'll be host segments, then theater segments. Joel Hodgson is an inventor himself. In fact, he was doing stand-up comedy at the time, appearing on Saturday Night Live, and was a prop comic. This is back in the 80s when everybody was doing stand-up comedy. And prop comics weren't as looked down upon, though, I think they might actually make a resurgence. Mystery Science Theater really consists of 2 parts. The host segments, they're on the Satellite of Love, and they either talk about the movie or just do a skit unrelated to the movie. And then the parts that most people recognize, where they're the silhouettes watching this bad, terrible movie and riffing on it, making fun of it, putting words in the character's mouth that they would never say, especially in 1958. Personally, I like the newer movies that they would start doing, especially with the Mike Nelson Sci-Fi era. Since this is a monster movie from 1958, it's not very good. It's not Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Hell, it's not even This Island Earth. But what are you going to do? It's from 58. The transfer on this is quite bad. The sound quality is also bad, which they riff on. And I really think this episode is not the best way to kick off the series. Because this was broadcast on an actual television channel, backed by a production company, they had to get licensing rights for these movies, so a lot of times they would use public domain movies so that they wouldn't have to pay for these licensing rights, because anyone could play a public domain movie. And the public domain movies tended to be crappy black and white movies. Do you go the cheap route and get a lower quality movie, or do you shell out a few bucks and get a quote-unquote higher quality, newer movie? It was a balancing act. So the quips in the very first episode are much different than what they would be later on. There's a lot more dead air. They did write for this episode as opposed to doing it off the cuff like the KTMA episodes, but still, they don't have as many. There'll be several minutes that goes by that they could be commenting what's on screen and they just don't say much. So it just gives a more lethargic and slower pace. Maybe you can add in your own quips. So, to me, the best Mystery Science Theater movies are ones that are so bad they're good. Something like Hobgoblins, which is watchable but also funny to laugh at. The worst ones are the ones that are too boring, and that's where The Crawling Eye falls into. Really, the worst of the worst. I would consider something like Monster a Go Go, where there's just nothing happening. Nothing happens. You can put words in their mouth, you can make fun of the stilted acting, or the terrible audio, or the horrendous framing where people are off screen talking and then sort of walking screen and then it gets blurry. But this just becomes a so bad it's bad. Not so bad it's good. Yeah, it's a poorly made film. It's rushed and it's super boring. But this doesn't make for a very pleasant viewing experience because you can actually take a pretty good movie as they've done with like riff tracks and riff on anything. It actually doesn't really have to be a bad movie. But the best are the so bad it's good. That's not what this is. The Crawling Eye is extremely boring. The real film is 84 minutes long. This episode, like all Mystery Science Theater episodes, is 90 minutes long, so they had to edit the film in order to fit it into 90 minutes because they need to put in the host segments. And so they actually cut certain parts out of this movie, and they try to cut out the parts that are the worst. And yet, still, this movie is terrible. And its biggest flaw is nothing happens for the first hour. You don't see anything about an eye. The eye comes at the end, as I've shown. There is a crawling eye, but for the first hour, it's at best a serial killer movie. And I say at best. So we get the two characters, Alan Brooks and Philip Truscott, who are sent to investigate some murders that have happened in this resort hotel in Switzerland. So most of it takes place in quote-unquote Switzerland. Well, it's on a soundstage with a terrible backdrop. And these backdrops of the Swiss Alps are bad, even for 58. But we get basically no mention of the eye. We see a scene where a guy kills two people, and it's like, okay, isn't this supposed to be the crawling eye? Now it's like a serial killer situation. And it's also quite confusing. They throw in a lot of characters that are just completely unnecessary. And because it's so poorly shot and dark, you get characters mixed up. And all this time you're wondering, okay, they're trying to investigate these disappearances. We have a scientist. We have a guy who works for the UN. We have a chick named Anne who gives a mind reading demonstration. We have a guy who works for the UN, Alan. So we get two mind reading sisters, a UN guy, a scientist, but no eye. It's like at the end of the movie they decided to put in the eye. Now the riffs in this are pretty rudimentary, and that's going to be true of the entire first season. But I will say, for a first episode, I expected it to be a lot worse. I mean, this is the first time they've done this on network television, and this is 1989. With this new channel, the Comedy Channel, that admitted they sort of hired Mystery Science Theater 3000 because they could take up an hour and a half of airtime, and they needed shows to fill their new channel. And their long runtime really helped Mystery Science Theater throughout the years, since basically no other series is an hour and a half long unless they're going to get the rights to show a movie. They can do it fairly cheaply, and they can cover a lot of airtime and get a lot of ads in. And really, the series has to be an hour and a half long. If you made it 30 minutes, you would see really, really cut up movies. Even an hour, you would just have to edit so much out of the movies that they would be impossible to follow or watch. And it would be kind of unfair as well, picking apart a movie that they edited from an hour and a half to 35 minutes. It would be kind of crazy. But with 90 minutes, they're able to show most of the film, edit out a few parts, and throw in some host segments. You get a pretty funny host segment where Gypsy, their other robot, gets all tangled up. They have to untangle her. So that's The Crawling Eye. You can find these episodes on YouTube, on the Mystery Science Theater YouTube channel. You can also find these on the Googleplex. Oh man, we'll get to that thing later, where they launch the newest season, but they do have all the episodes streamed there. And also Pluto and Tubi. So they actually have a lot of ways that you can watch this show. Netflix also has some episodes as well. And of course, there's the multitude of DVDs that they've released. But since less people are buying DVDs, they were really popular back in the day, the Mystery Science Theater DVDs specifically. They've started just releasing them to streaming platforms, and that's how people are seeing them now. In fact, on the Mystery Science Theater YouTube channel, they have a 24-hour streaming, where they're just always streaming something. You can talk to people in the live stream. It's pretty cool. So there's a lot of ways to watch this show now. I'm glad they've kind of decided to let it hit the streaming platforms rather than keeping it paywall behind these DVDs. That was the case for so many years. So next up, we're going to cover episode 2, The Robot vs. the Aztec Mummy, and I think this episode is quite a bit of a step up from The Crawling Eye. It also features a short, Radar Men from the Moon, that's also pretty enjoyable. So check that one out. Thanks a lot. Subscribe and like, and join us on this journey to review every single episode of Mystery Science Theater. To my knowledge, no one has ever done this. Why would anyone do this? And check out our playlist for the other series that we've covered. Currently doing Black Mirror, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Twilight Zone, and of course every single episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Thanks a lot.